Welcome to Health 2660. Here we don't just talk about health, we tell the stories that heal. Now please listen to the story. Smells like water, he mumbled, staring into his usual morning brew. That was the first crack in the facade. The first whisper ignored. My dad George, a man who could identify the origin of a coffee bean by its aroma alone, was suddenly adrift in a sea of blandness. I brushed it off a momentary lapse. We all have them, right? But then came the spoon. Dropped, clattered against the ceramic bowl, scattering cereal like fallen leaves. I'm just tired, Linda. Real tired. The words were thick, slurred, like he was wading through molasses. He turned, and for a terrifying, heart-stopping second, he looked around our kitchen, his kitchen, like a stranger, lost in an unfamiliar house. 10 minutes later, the storm had passed. The sun was shining again. George was back, laughing, apologizing, blaming a bad night's sleep. Maybe I'm just getting old. He chuckled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. But the image of that lost, confused look, the heavy drag of his words, the limp fall of the spoon, it was etched into my memory. I couldn't shake it. That afternoon, fueled by a dread I couldn't explain, I found myself spiraling down a Google rabbit hole. Sudden loss of smell, dropped utensil, slurred speech, confusion. The internet, usually a source of comfort and information, became a harbinger of doom. One phrase kept surfacing, repeating itself, like a broken record. TIA, transient ischemic attack. A mini-stroke. My breath hitched. A mini-stroke. It sounded so insignificant, so easily dismissed. But the more I read, the more a cold dread gripped me. I didn't wait. I didn't hesitate. I bundled Dad into the car, his protests echoing in the small space. I'm fine, sweetie. You're overreacting. It was just a dizzy spell. He argued all the way to the ER, but I was deaf to his complaints. My gut screamed at me to act, and I wasn't about to ignore it. At the hospital, the hours crawled by. Tests, scans, questions, repeated endlessly. Dad, still convinced I was making a mountain out of a molehill, sat impatiently flipping through old magazines. Finally, the doctor, a kind-faced woman with weary eyes, pulled us into a small, sterile room. The air crackled with unspoken tension. George, she began, her voice gentle but firm. What you experienced this morning was very likely a TIA, a transient ischemic attack, a mini-stroke. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Dad's face paled. He looked at me, then back at the doctor, confusion warring with disbelief. It's like your brain, the doctor continued, gave you a tap on the shoulder, a warning, a brief interruption of blood flow. It stopped itself, but it's telling us something important. She paused, her gaze unwavering. Most people ignore these signs. They go back to normal within minutes, and they write it off. But here's the truth. 1 in 3 people who have a TIA will suffer a full-blown stroke within a year, unless we act now. The room seemed to tilt. 1 in 3. The odds were terrifying. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of fear. The doctor launched into a detailed explanation of what to look for symptoms Dad had exhibited that we had unknowingly missed. Loss of smell or taste, sudden confusion or forgetting familiar places, dropping objects without reason, tingling or numbness around the mouth or eyes, sudden fatigue or the overwhelming need to sleep immediately, mood changes that come out of nowhere, slurred speech or difficulty reading. Each symptom she listed was a punch to the gut, a confirmation of my deepest fears. Dad sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. I thought I was just tired. The doctor nodded grimly. That's the danger, George. TIAs don't scream. They whisper. They lull you into a false sense of security. They disappear before you have time to react. That evening, after we'd returned home, the relief of the diagnosis warring with the stark reality of its implications, I couldn't stop replaying the morning in my mind. How quickly everything had returned to normal. How easily I could have dismissed it all as nothing. A bad night's sleep, a momentary lapse in judgment, a clumsy moment. My father was alive, sitting across from me in his favorite armchair, but he might not have been. And it all started with something as seemingly insignificant as a spoon falling. That night, the fear was a tangible presence in the house, a silent specter lurking in the shadows. But amidst the fear, a steely determination began to take root. We wouldn't let this warning go unheeded. George didn't argue after that. The gravity of the situation had finally sunk in. He knew he'd been given a second chance, a gift wrapped in a terrifying warning. With my help, we meticulously crafted a plan, a roadmap to a healthier future. It wasn't a drastic overhaul, but a series of small, sustainable changes designed to nudge him back on track. First, daily walks. Just 30 minutes around the neighborhood, rain or shine. At first he grumbled, complaining about his aching knees and the unpredictable weather. But slowly, he began to embrace the routine, the rhythm of his footsteps, a steady counterpoint to the worries that still lingered in the back of his mind. Next, we tackled the kitchen. Cutting back on ultra-processed foods was a challenge. Frozen meals, a staple of his bachelor days, were replaced with vibrant greens, colorful fruits, and the heart-healthy goodness of olive oil. Canned soup and sugary sodas, comforting crutches he'd relied on for years, were banished from the pantry. Staying hydrated became a daily ritual, a constant reminder of the importance of flushing out toxins and keeping his blood flowing smoothly. And every morning, without fail, he checked his blood pressure, the numbers, a constant report card on his progress. Perhaps the most crucial element of our plan was the symptom journal, a simple notebook where he could jot down anything that felt off, no matter how insignificant it seemed. A strange tingling in his hand, a fleeting moment of confusion, a sudden wave of fatigue. We vowed to investigate every whisper, every subtle change, rather than dismissing them as simply getting old. Over time, I learned to see what others missed to decipher the subtle cues his body was sending. That strange ringing in his ear he'd casually mentioned one day. It could have been a warning sign, a fleeting indication of restricted blood flow. The numbness around his mouth when he brushed his teeth too vigorously. The day he suddenly forgot how to turn on the TV, a task he'd performed countless times. Even the morning he snapped at me for no reason, then apologized profusely 2 minutes later. That unexplained mood swing meant something. None of these episodes lasted long. They were fleeting, ephemeral, easily dismissed as quirks of age or temporary lapses in memory. But mini strokes don't need time. They just need an opening, a vulnerable moment where the brain's defenses are down. The cruel trick of a TIA is how quickly it comes and goes, leaving behind only a faint echo of its presence. George was lucky. He had me someone who was willing to listen to the whispers, to see beyond the surface. But many aren't so fortunate. By the time the symptoms fade, the opportunity to act is already slipping away, the window of intervention closing with each passing second. And that's why I felt compelled to share our story, to shout it from the rooftops if necessary. Because what looks like tiredness, irritability, or a clumsy moment might actually be the brain begging for help, a desperate plea for attention before it's too late. A few weeks later, at a follow-up appointment, the doctor greeted us with a warm smile. "Your blood pressure's looking much better, George. And your blood sugar, too. You've been working hard." George beamed, puffing out his chest slightly. "I walk every morning now, rain or shine, and we've been eating real food. Linda's been keeping me in line," he added with a wink. The doctor grinned. "It's working. Your numbers don't lie," I chimed in, my voice filled with genuine relief. "It's amazing how much better he feels, not just physically, but emotionally, too. He's got more energy, he's sleeping better, and he's even cracking jokes again." The doctor wasn't surprised. She understood the intricate connection between physical and mental well-being. She knew the science walking boosts circulation to the brain, nourishing vital neurons and improving cognitive function. Natural foods reduce inflammation, protecting blood vessels from damage and promoting optimal blood flow. Stable blood pressure means fewer shocks to the brain's fragile highways, minimizing the risk of future disruptions. And a clearer mind, free from the fog of fatigue and confusion, means faster reaction time, mentally and emotionally. If George could say one thing to other families, one piece of advice he wished he could have received before that fateful morning, it would be this: don't wait for something dramatic. Don't dismiss the subtle signs as simply getting old. Sometimes your brain doesn't scream, it whispers. And if you're not listening, you'll miss your chance. I now share our story wherever I can, at community centers, senior living facilities, even online forums. I tell people to watch for the seemingly insignificant sudden clumsiness, a temporary loss of hearing in one ear, a moment of confusion about names or places, a wave of dizziness or unexplained fatigue, mood changes that feel out of character. And I always end with the same line, a mantra, that has become my personal mission statement. It's better to be wrong and safe than right and too late. Better to err on the side of caution, to seek medical attention at the first sign of trouble, than to dismiss a potential warning and risk a devastating outcome. One quiet afternoon, months after the initial scare, Linda and George walked slowly through the park, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the grass. He paused, pointing to a flock of ducks paddling serenely in the pond. "You know," he said, a thoughtful expression on his face, "that coffee really did smell like nothing that day. Like warm water. I couldn't place it." I laughed, a light, carefree sound that echoed through the peaceful park. "Next time I'll brew it stronger, Dad. Maybe I used too much water that morning." But deep down, we both knew. It wasn't the coffee. It was a warning, a subtle but unmistakable signal that something was amiss. And we had listened. We had heeded the whisper. Our lives had changed since that day, irrevocably altered by the near miss. We were more aware, more vigilant, more attuned to the subtle language of the body. We had learned the hard way that even the smallest signs can hold profound meaning, that listening to the whispers can be the difference between life and death. Health 2660. Thanks you for listening. We'll see you in the next video, and until then, be kind to yourself.